What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in yesterday's video, I talked about a must-draft player in every single round of your fantasy drafts. Today, we're going to be doing the opposite, talking about one player that I would not be drafting in each round of your fantasy football drafts. I think it's just as important to kind of avoid like the landmines in fantasy as it is to, hit on each player in each round, because if you hit in round one, but then you end up taking a terrible pick in round two, you're not really getting much of a benefit from, that strong pick in the first round. So as always, I want to know your thoughts. Let me know how we're feeling about these players. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know down below. And let's just jump right into it. So we're going to be starting off in round one. And full transparency, I don't really think there are any terrible picks in round one. If I had to, pick one that I don't love, it would probably be Nick Chubb. I have Chubb ranked as my 15th best player, so I'd prefer him in like the early to mid second round. But I don't think a late round one Chubb is going to be like an egregious pick. So if I had to go with one, it would be Nick Chubb. But I don't think pick 11, pick 12 Chubb is actually like a terrible fantasy pick. Now moving into round two, this is going to be Patrick Mahomes. I just cannot get around to mid-second round Patrick Mahomes. Even if you were going to take a quarterback and you were going to take one in the second round, what is the justification for taking Mahomes a half round earlier than both Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts? I have all three of those guys in the same tier. I think I have Allen at 1, Mahomes at 2, Hurts at 3. I'm just not seeing what makes Mahomes the clear best quarterback, and a spot where you're going to go from drafting a wide receiver like Amon-Ra to the back end of the second where you're looking at Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. It is a big difference going from the mid to late second round, especially in other leagues where you can find Lamar Jackson slip into the 3-4 turn, Fields going in the mid to late fourth round. With those other values, I just cannot stomach mid-second round Mahomes, especially ahead of a guy like Amon-Ra. That to me is honestly crazy. And what I've noticed from these three quarterbacks is that you'll typically see one go mid-second round, then you'll see one go late round two, and then sometimes that third one will slip to early round three, mid-round three. Pretty much the only chance I'd be taking one of these top quarterbacks is if they're slipping into the third round. I would consider them, I think I have them around pick 28, 29, 30, somewhere in there. I'd consider them there, but before that, I'm just not willing to spend that draft capital. Now moving over to round three, Najee Harris is going to be my least favorite pick in this draft. I'm honestly just becoming increasingly more and more out on Najee. It seems pretty clear that the path to fantasy success for him is going to come through a large workload. As a rookie, he had the highest opportunity share in the NFL that carried him to be the running back 6th in points per game. Last season, his workload fell off a little bit. He only had the 10th highest opportunity share, and he dropped to the running back 19 in points per game. I feel like if you are spending third-round draft capital on Najee, you're betting that he's going to be, much closer to his 2021 workload compared to 2022, and I just struggle to see that happening. He's been a very efficient player overall in his first two NFL seasons, and on the other hand, his backup, Jalen Warren, has just been the straight-up more efficient option when we look back to last season, his rookie year. And so I would actually say that I think there's a better chance of Jalen Warren leading this backfield in fantasy points than there is of Najee hitting that rookie season workload. I truly think that's the case. I just don't think it makes logical sense to look at these two players. You have one guy who's been pretty inefficient. The other guy, Jalen Warren, has been an efficient option. And you're expecting the Steelers to say, we're just going to give a massive amount of touches to this less efficient player because we drafted him in the first round. I just don't think it's going to play out like that. I think there are multiple different running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks that I would take over Najee Harris that are currently being drafted behind him. So definitely not a player I'm super interested in this season. Now moving into round four, I actually have two players that I'm kind of avoiding in this round. The first one is going to be Kenneth Walker, and then the second one is going to be George Kittle. So starting off with Walker, I'm just pretty out on him this season, especially compared to where he's being drafted. Last season, we saw the Seahawks were pretty reluctant to use him as a pass catcher, and he was also one of the worst goal line backs in the NFL. So then the Seahawks go out, they draft Zach Charbonnet in the second round. To me, it makes sense that they're probably drafting him to fill that role. I don't think they're going to be spending a second round pick just to put some running back as the RB2 and barely have a workload. It would just be not a great use of your draft capital. So I think those are roles that Zach Charbonnet can come in. He can take some receiving work. He can take some goal line work, some short yardage situations. And those are going to be the most important opportunities for fantasy football. I feel like Kenneth Walker is kind of going to be turned into an early down grinder, which is not a super great role for fantasy, especially in round 4. They're just a bunch of wide receivers I would prefer over him in this area. Plus, you have a guy like Dameon Pierce who's going in round 5. Pierce is a guy who played every snap with the starters the first 2 drives of their most recent preseason game, and he's probably lined up for a 3-down workload compared to Kenneth Walker, who's probably going to be in a committee. So really, there are tons of other positions I would prefer here over Kenneth Walker. And then for George Kittle, this is something I talked about in my tight end rankings video, I believe, but we saw Christian McCaffrey debut with the 49ers in week 7. He barely played in that game, and then from week 8 on, that's kind of when I'm getting the sample size from. From week 8 on, there were 6 regular season games where we saw CMC, Kittle, Debo, and Ayuk all play together. They were all healthy in those 6 games. Kittle averaged 10.5 points per game in that sample, and that includes 4 total touchdowns. So he kind of hit in the touchdown department, still barely got over 10 points per game. He only averaged 4.3 targets per game and 35 receiving yards per game over that stretch. So Kittle's production was really not great. His usage was kind of poor. He was not commanding a ton of volume. And I really struggle to pick someone in the 4th round where if everyone just stays healthy on their offense, he's probably going to have a tough time really living up to that. So to me, 4th round just seems way too early for someone who has these glaring concerns on their own roster. And then moving into round 5, we've got another tight end here. It's going to be Dallas Goedert. I really can just not get around to 5th round Goedert. I understand the appeal to Dallas Goedert is going to be his safety. The odds of him finishing as a mid-tier tight end 1 are probably pretty high. He's going to be on a nice offense. He's been a pretty consistent option over the last few seasons. But that safety at the tight end position, I just don't think it's worth taking that in the 5th round. You're passing on wide receivers like Mike Williams, Drake London, Deontay Johnson. Even at running back, you have a guy like J.K. Dobbins going after him. I just feel like drafting Dallas Goedert is not a winning move. Right, in your fantasy leagues, you need to be the top team out of 10, 12, 14, whatever it is. I don't think picking Goedert really gets you there. I feel like it's a pick where you're kind of just treading water in your league. So definitely someone I would not be reaching for in the 5th round. And then we actually have another tight end here in round 6. I thought this was kind of a tough round to pick a bad pick in. I ended up going with Kyle Pitts. I've actually been decently high on Kyle Pitts heading into the season. He's clearly a very talented player. He just hasn't had the quarterback play or the best usage so far in his NFL career. The issue is he saw some pretty concerning usage in the Falcons' most recent preseason game. So the Falcons played their starters. They had Ritter out there. Drake London was playing, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. All these dudes were in the game. The Falcons starters played 17 snaps together. Pitts was only on the field for 9 of those and only had a 50% route participation. We saw tight end, I'm not sure if it's Michael or Mecole Pruitt. He also played 9 snaps, so he matched Kyle Pitts' snaps. And then we saw Jonnu Smith also play 7 snaps. So, that is very concerning usage. If you have a tight end who's barely getting over 50% of the snaps and only a 50% route participation, that is not a tight end who should be drafted in round 6. Obviously, there's no guarantee that carries into the season, but there's kind of been a pattern of this with Kyle Pitts being, underutilized, misused, however you want to frame it. But, at this point, I would just much rather take a lot of the other wide receivers or running backs that are going in this range. In round 7, my least favorite pick is going to be Dalvin Cook. I don't really understand the appeal of Dalvin Cook being drafted within a few spots of Kamara, Montgomery, James Cook. Kamara, James Cook, these are guys who should lead their backfield. Montgomery has a very valuable committee split with Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw it last year with Jamal Williams. I feel like a few weeks into the NFL season, Dalvin Cook is probably going to be the backup running back behind Breece Hall, and probably at best he's going to be in some sort of split with Breece Hall throughout the season. It just seems like his name value and pass production is propping him up. But you're probably going to be drafting a backup running back over wide receivers like Michael Pittman, Jahan Dotson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison. Just really cannot get there with Dalvin Cook. And it's not even like a spot where the other running backs in this area are terrible, right? Like I mentioned them, Kamara, Montgomery, James Cook. You can find quality running back picks in round 7. I just don't think Dalvin Cook is one of those. Moving into round 8, this is where I have Kirk Cousins. I'm really not like anti-Kirk Cousins for fantasy, but I just feel like if you've punted the quarterback position, you don't have one of the top, I think it's like top 9 guys, you just should not be reaching for Kirk Cousins in the 8th round. Just first off, I think there are better options going after him. Guys like Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Anthony Richardson, Aaron Rodgers. I would take all those guys over Kirk Cousins, but I also just think you don't want to be the first person taking someone from this tier. I've talked about this over and over again. You can throw Dak, Tua into this group of players, but I don't want to be reaching for 8th round Kirk Cousins because you're going to end up finding Daniel Jones in round 10, round 11, Geno in that area, Rodgers in that area. One of these guys is going to fall unless you have like 3-4 league mates like double tapping the quarterback position, but I still think you can get these guys at a much better value a little bit later on in your drafts. So definitely not on board with round 8 Kirk Cousins. Now moving into round 9, I honestly don't think there's a glaringly bad pick in this round. Originally, I was thinking Jamal Williams, but then he's pretty much guaranteed like 3 strong workload games to start off the season, so I don't even really think he's a bad pick there. So I really don't even have some to talk about here. I feel like this is a pretty fair round in terms of ADP. In round 10, I have Russell Wilson. There's just really no reason to be drafting your backup quarterback in round 10 unless you are like double tapping like Richardson and Rodgers, then I get it. But if your backup quarterback is going to be Russell Wilson, please do not be taking him in round 10. You are passing on interesting running backs and wide receivers for someone who's probably like never going to be slotting into your lineup except for like a bye week or an injury. In round 11, my least favorite pick is going to be Allen Lazard. I just really struggle to see the path of Lazard ever starting in your lineup, right? Like he could sit on your bench, maybe he delivers a few solid performances, but like this isn't best ball. You're going to need to actively start him in your lineup, and I just don't know when you would actually want to do that. On a wide open wide receiver room last year, he was the wide receiver 34 in points per game, which is solid, but he was also operating as the clear wide receiver 1 for the first half of the season before Christian Watson broke out. At best, he's going to be the Jets wide receiver 2. I just think they're going to be better players to spend your pick on here, like round 11 or later. And then moving into round 12, have 3 players I just do not like in this area. We've got Adam Thielen, Juwan Johnson, and Gerald Everett. Pretty similar to like round 10 Russ for these tight ends. You should not be drafting this tier of tight ends in round 12. There are going to be comparable players that are just going to be sitting on waivers to start off the season. Like you can get Sam Laporta way later than this, Luke Musgrave, players like that. No need to reach for Juwan Johnson, Gerald Everett when you can be going after like valuable handcuff running backs in this range. And then for Adam Thielen, Adam Thielen has been kind of a pretty solid fantasy option throughout his career. So you may be wondering, like, really, round 12, not even worth a flyer there? I honestly just feel like he's kind of cooked at this point. Last year, we saw him operate as the wide receiver 2 on a very strong Vikings offense. He ran the second most routes in the entire NFL and saw the 5th most red zone targets and was only able to turn that into the wide receiver 41 in points per game. Now he's going to a much worse offense with the Panthers here, and just looking at the wide receivers on his own team, I would prefer Mingo and Chark like straight up over Adam Thielen at this point. I just think Thielen is a very like low ceiling option. Mingo, you don't even really know what you're getting, which could provide some upside. And then I just feel like Chark is probably the better player at this point in their careers. So those are going to be my do not draft players in each round. How are we feeling about these guys? Agree with me, disagree? Let me hear it down below in the comment section. If you didn't get to check out my must draft player from every round, that's going to be up on my channel. So go take a look at that if you are interested. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.